The Veratt delegation walked through the crowded corridors of Trade Station Harmony, 7 like they owned every inch of it. Their heavy footsteps echoed against the metal floors, and smaller species pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass. Each Veratt stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scale bodies covered in old scars that they displayed like medals. They were warriors, and they wanted everyone to know it. Leading the group was Haifeng Drenix, the most decorated hunter in Veratt history. His green scales had faded to a darker shade from age and countless battles. 3 deep claw marks ran across his face, souvenirs from a beast he had killed with his bare hands on a death world called Morven 6. He wore no armor because armor suggested fear, and the Veratt feared nothing. The delegation stopped in the central trading hub where dozens of species conducted their business. Drenix climbed onto a raised platform normally used for auction announcements. He did not ask permission. The Veratt never asked. "Hear me, creatures of the galaxy," Drenix bellowed. His voice carried across the entire hub, silencing conversations. The Veratt have walked on 37 death worlds. We have faced the acid serpents of Krell. We have hunted the shadow stalkers of the burning moons. We have killed pack beasts that numbered in the hundreds. He paused, letting his words sink in. Several aliens looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. "No beast in this universe frightens the Veratt," Drenix continued. "We are the apex. We are the hunters that other hunters fear. Your species hide behind walls and weapons because you have prey instincts. We do not." Daniel Reeves watched this display from a food stall where he was eating something that tasted almost like chicken. He was a logistics coordinator for a human trading company, handling shipping schedules and cargo manifests. It was boring work, but it paid well and let him see the galaxy. He was 34 years old, average height, with brown hair that was starting to thin at the temples. Nothing about him suggested warrior or hunter. He had seen the Veratt before. They came to stations like this one to trade rare hunting trophies and to remind everyone how dangerous they were. Daniel usually ignored them. He had a shuttle to catch in 2 days. His Aunt Margaret back on Earth needed help moving to an assisted living facility, and he had promised to be there. Drenix jumped down from the platform and walked among the crowd. Aliens scattered before him. He stopped in front of a group of Pellini, a small furry species known for their nervous disposition. "You," Drenix said, pointing at one of them. "Name a beast. Any beast in the galaxy. Name something that would make the Veratt run." The Pellini trembled. I cannot think of one, Haifeng." "Of course you cannot." Drenix laughed. "Because nothing exists that we fear." Daniel rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Wait until you meet my aunt's cat." He did not realize his translator chip was still active. The words broadcast clearly to everyone within 10 feet, including a Veratt warrior standing nearby. The warrior's head snapped toward Daniel, eyes narrowing. "What did the human say?" Drenix demanded, turning around. Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Nothing. Just talking to myself." "You mentioned a beast," the warrior said. "A creature called cat. From your homeworld." Drenix approached Daniel slowly, each step deliberate. He towered over the human, close enough that Daniel could smell the metallic scent of Veratt breath. "Explain yourself, human." "It was a joke," Daniel said. "Cats are small. Tiny, actually. They are not dangerous to something like you." "You spoke with confidence," Drenix said. "You implied this cat would frighten us." "Why would you say this if it were not true?" "Because I was not thinking. It just slipped out." Drenix studied him for a long moment. Daniel could see the intelligence behind those predator eyes, calculating and cold. "Humans are known for understatement," Drenix said. "Your species claims Earth is merely a difficult world when the data shows it is a Class 4 death planet. You survived ice ages, super predators, and constant natural disasters. Yet you say it was fine." "We adapted," Daniel said weakly. "And now you casually mention a creature that would frighten the Veratt, then try to dismiss it." Drenix leaned closer. "I think you're hiding something, human. I think your cat is more than you claim." "It really is not." Drenix straightened up and addressed his warriors. "We will accompany this human to Earth. We will meet this beast he speaks of, and we will prove, once again, that nothing in this universe can make the Veratt afraid. That is not necessary, Daniel said quickly. I'm just going to help my aunt move furniture. It is very boring. Then we will help with furniture and meet the cat. Drennick smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Unless you're trying to protect us from something, Daniel realized he had no way out of this. The Veratt had decided, and arguing would only make them more suspicious. He thought about Whiskers, his aunt's orange tabby who had terrorized mailmen and veterinarians for 12 years. The cat was 18 pounds of pure attitude wrapped in fur. Fine, Daniel sighed. But I warned you. Yes, Drennick said, still smiling. You did. As Daniel walked away to book additional passage on his shuttle, he pulled out his communicator and dialed his aunt's number. She answered on the third ring. Danny, is everything okay? Aunt Margaret, I am bringing some guests when I visit. Alien warriors. Very large ones. There was a pause. Will they eat pot roast? I have no idea. Well, make sure they wipe their feet before coming inside. I just cleaned the floors. Daniel ended the call and looked back at the Veratt, who were already gathering their things to follow him. He had a very bad feeling about this trip. Somewhere on Earth, in a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, an orange cat named Whiskers sat on a windowsill and watched birds outside. He had no idea that guests were coming. He did not care about guests. He did not care about much of anything except sunny spots, food, and the occasional mouse that wandered into the basement. But Whiskers had opinions about strangers. Strong opinions. And the Veratt were about to learn what happened when you entered his territory uninvited. The transport ship hummed quietly as it traveled through folded space toward the Sol system. Daniel sat in the passenger cabin, trying to read a book on his tablet, but the Veratt made concentration impossible. 5 of them had insisted on joining the trip, and they spent every waking hour talking about their hunts. The acid serpent was 40 feet long, one warrior named Groth said proudly. Its venom could dissolve metal. I killed it with a spear through the eye. I once tracked a shadow stalker for 3 days without sleep. Another called Phoenix added. It could turn invisible in darkness. I learned to hunt by smell alone. Drennick sat apart from his warriors, studying a data pad with information about Earth. His expression grew more interested with each passing hour. Human, he called out. Your planet has creatures called bears. They weigh over 1,000 pounds and can run faster than your ground vehicles. Yes, Daniel said without looking up. And wolves. Pack hunters that coordinate attacks and chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Also, yes, great white sharks, lions, crocodiles that have remained unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect killing machines. Drennick set down the pad. Your world is filled with predators. Why did you mention the cat specifically? Daniel finally looked up. Because the cat lives in my aunt's house. But surely these larger creatures are more dangerous. Whiskers would disagree. Drennick leaned forward. You continue to speak of this cat with respect. Either you are mocking us, or there is something about this creature you are not explaining. Daniel considered his words carefully. Cats are different from other predators. They do not hunt because they need food. They hunt because they enjoy it. They will catch a mouse, let it go, catch it again, and repeat this until they get bored. Then they might not even eat it. The Veratt exchanged glances. Killing for pleasure rather than survival was something they understood. It was also something they respected. They are also patient, Daniel continued. A cat will wait for hours without moving, barely breathing, just watching. And when they strike, they are fast. Really fast. You do not see them coming. We have faced swift creatures before, Groth said dismissively. I'm sure you have. But those creatures wanted to survive. They attacked because they had to. Cats attack because they want to. There is a difference. Drennick said nothing, but his eyes showed he was processing this information. Daniel returned to his book, hoping that would be the end of IT. Was not. The ship exited folded space near Earth 2 days later. Daniel looked through the viewport at the blue and green planet below and felt a familiar warmth in his chest. No matter how many worlds he visited, Earth always felt like home. The Veratt gathered at the windows, studying the planet with tactical precision. Dense atmosphere, Phoenix noted. High oxygen content. The life forms must be energetic. 70% water coverage, Groth added. Many places for aquatic predators to hide. The gravity is acceptable, Drenix said. We will not be slowed. Daniel guided the ship to a landing zone near his aunt's property. The farmhouse sat on 20 acres of Pennsylvania countryside, surrounded by trees and fields that had been in his family for 4 generations. The autumn leaves were turning orange and red, carpeting the ground in color. The ship touched down in a field behind the barn. Daniel lowered the ramp and stepped out, breathing in the crisp October air. It smelled like fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Like home. The Veratt followed, scanning the environment for threats. Their heads moved constantly, checking sightlines and potential ambush points. Daniel almost laughed. They were treating his aunt's farm like a combat zone. This way, he said, leading them toward the house. Aunt Margaret was waiting on the porch. She was 78 years old, small and thin, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a floral apron over her dress, and her hands were dusted with flour from baking. She looked at the massive alien warriors approaching her home and simply nodded. Danny, you made it. And these must be your friends. Aunt Margaret, this is Haifong Drenix and his warriors. They wanted to see Earth. Drenix stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He towered over the elderly woman by nearly 4 feet. His scarred face and predator eyes would have frightened most beings in the galaxy. Margaret pointed at his feet. Wipe those before you come in. I'm mopped yesterday. Drenix blinked. He looked down at his feet, then back at the tiny human who had just given him an order. For a moment, Daniel thought the Veratt might take offense. Instead, Drenix carefully wiped his feet on the mat by the door. His warriors did the same. Good, Margaret said. Pot roast will be ready in an hour. I hope you are hungry. She turned and walked inside. The Veratt looked at Daniel with something approaching confusion. Your elder has no fear, Drenix observed. She raised 4 children and survived 2 husbands, Daniel said. There is nothing in the universe that scares Aunt Margaret. They entered the farmhouse. It was cluttered with decades of accumulated life. Photographs covered every wall. Shelves held ceramic figurines, old books, and various trinkets collected over a lifetime. The Veratt had to duck through doorways and move carefully to avoid knocking things over. Daniel noticed movement on top of a tall bookshelf in the living room. 2 yellow eyes gleamed in the shadows, watching the newcomers. Whiskers had noticed the guests. The cat did not move, did not make a sound. He simply observed, measuring these strange creatures that had entered his territory. Daniel knew that look. He had seen it many times, usually right before Whiskers did something unpleasant to someone. The beast, Drenix said quietly, following Daniel's gaze. I see it. He sees you too. Whiskers yawned, showing his teeth, then settled back into the shadows. His eyes never closed, never looked away from the Veratt. The warriors pretended not to notice, but Daniel saw them, checking the bookshelf every few seconds. The cat was already in their heads. This was going to be a very interesting visit. The Veratt spread through the farmhouse like a tactical unit clearing hostile territory. They checked corners, examined windows, and tested the stability of furniture. Daniel watched them with a mixture of amusement and concern. These were warriors who had conquered death worlds, and they were treating his aunt's living room like a battlefield. The structure is sound, Phoenix reported. Multiple exit points. Good sight lines. The kitchen contains cutting implements, Groth added. Potential weapons. Drenix stood in the center of the room, his eyes fixed on the bookshelf where Whiskers had been moments ago. The cat was gone now, vanished without a sound. None of them had seen him leave. Where did it go? Drenix asked quietly. Daniel shrugged. Cats do that. They disappear and reappear when they want to. Nothing simply disappears. Whiskers does. Aunt Margaret came in from the kitchen with a tray of tea and cookies. She sat on the coffee table and gestured for everyone to sit. The Veratt looked at the delicate furniture with concern. Drenix lowered himself carefully onto a couch that creaked under his weight but held firm. Danny tells me you boys are hunters, Margaret said, settling into her rocking chair. "We are the greatest hunters in the galaxy," Drenix replied. "The Veratt have never met a beast we could not conquer." "That is nice. Try a cookie. I made them this morning." Drenix picked up a cookie between two massive fingers. It looked like a crumb in his hand. He ate it in one bite. "Acceptable," he said. "High praise." Margaret smiled and rocked gently in her chair. "Whiskers does not like strangers, you know. He might take a while to warm up to you. We are not concerned about the cat." "Of course not, but I thought I should mention it anyway." Something moved at the edge of Daniel's vision. He turned his head slowly and saw Whiskers sitting in the doorway to the kitchen. The cat had appeared without making a single sound. His orange fur seemed to glow in the afternoon light, and his yellow eyes were locked onto Drenix. "The beast is behind you," Phoenix whispered to his leader. Drenix turned his head. Whiskers did not move. The cat simply sat there, tail wrapped around his front paws, staring. His expression was impossible to read, which somehow made it worse. "It is just watching," Drenix said. "He does that," Daniel explained. "A lot." The staring continued. Drenix, who had faced creatures that could dissolve flesh with their breath, found himself unable to look away from an 18-pound house cat. There was something in those yellow eyes, something ancient and calculating. The cat was studying him, measuring him, deciding something. Minutes passed. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the ticking of Margaret's old grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, Drenix broke eye contact. He turned back to face the room and reached for another cookie. "The creature holds no interest for me," he announced, but Daniel had seen. The warrior had looked away first. In the animal kingdom, that meant something. It meant submission, or at least uncertainty. The other Veratt had seen it too. They exchanged quick glances, saying nothing. Whiskers stood up, stretched lazily, and walked across the room. His movements were fluid, each step perfectly silent despite the wooden floor. He passed within inches of Groth, who tensed visibly. The cat did not acknowledge him at all. When Whiskers reached the center of the room, he sat down again. This time he began grooming himself, licking one paw and wiping it over his ear. He had turned his back to the Veratt completely, dismissing them as unworthy of attention. "It mocks us," Phoenix muttered. "It is cleaning itself," Daniel said. "Cats are very particular about hygiene. A predator does not expose its back to potential threats. This creature either does not see us as threats, or it wants us to attack, so it can counter. I think you are overthinking this." Whiskers finished grooming and yawned widely. His mouth opened to reveal rows of small, sharp teeth designed for piercing and tearing. Then he curled up on a rug in a patch of sunlight and closed his eyes. The Veratt watched him sleep. A creature that felt safe enough to rest in the presence of 5 alien warriors was either very stupid or very confident. The Veratt were beginning to suspect it was not stupid. Evening came. Aunt Margaret served pot roast with potatoes and vegetables. The Veratt ate cautiously at first, then with enthusiasm. They had not expected the food to be good. "Your elder cooks well," Drenix told Daniel. "I will let her know." After dinner, Margaret showed them to the barn where she had prepared sleeping areas. The Veratt preferred to sleep in defensible positions rather than the soft beds inside the house. They found the barn acceptable, with its high walls and multiple exits. "We will rest here," Drenix announced. "Tomorrow, we will observe the cat more closely." "You're going to be disappointed," Daniel said. "He is really just a normal cat." "Perhaps, but I will know for certain." Daniel left them in the barn and returned to the house. He helped Margaret clean up from dinner, and they talked about the move to assisted living. She was sad to leave the farm, but knew it was time. The house was too big for one person, and her knees were not what they used to be. "Your friends are strange," Margaret said as she dried dishes. "They are not really my friends. They kind of invited themselves. They are afraid of Whiskers." "I do not think afraid is the right word." Margaret smiled knowingly. "I have seen that look before. The mailman has the same expression when Whiskers sits on the porch. That cat has a gift for making people uncomfortable." Outside, in the barn, the Veratt warriors settled into their sleeping positions. They posted a watch, as was their custom, even though they did not expect danger. But sometime in the night, The warrior on watch saw two yellow eyes gleaming from the rafters above. Whiskers had entered the barn without making a sound, and he sat in the darkness, watching them. The warrior did not wake the others. But he did not sleep either. Neither did Whiskers. The Veratt woke at dawn to find Whiskers sitting in the barn doorway. The cat had not moved since the warrior spotted him in the rafters, or maybe he had moved 100 times during the night. There was no way to know. He simply sat there, blocking the exit, watching them with those yellow eyes. Groth approached the doorway first. He took one step toward the cat, and Whiskers vanished. Not ran, not jumped, just ceased to be there. One moment orange fur and yellow eyes, the next moment empty space. Where did it go? Groth demanded, spinning around. I do not know, Phoenix said. I was watching the entire time. I never saw it move. Drenix pushed past his warriors and stepped outside. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the smell of dew on grass. Birds sang in the trees. It was peaceful, almost pleasant. Then he saw Whiskers sitting on top of the tractor 20 feet away. The cat was grooming himself as if he had been there for hours. That is not possible, Drenix said. The distance is too great. The day continued, and so did the cat's impossible appearances. The Veratt tried to track him, using all their hunting skills and experience. They failed. Whiskers appeared on a fence post moments after they had checked it. He materialized inside the house in rooms they had just cleared. He sat on top of Phoenix's pack at one point, and nobody knew how long he had been there. This creature defies logic, Groth said during a break. It is everywhere and nowhere. It is a cat, Daniel said for what felt like the 100th time. They are like this. Your species lives with these things. Over 400 million domestic cats on Earth. About one for every 20 humans. The Veratt processed this information with visible discomfort. 400 million creatures that could appear and disappear at will, living among the human population. It was disturbing. Inside the house, Aunt Margaret went about her daily routine, completely unconcerned with the alien warriors stalking her cat. She packed boxes, sorted through old photographs, and made lunch. When she needed to move through a room where a Veratt was standing guard, she simply said, "Excuse me," and waited for them to move. They always moved. In the afternoon, Whiskers made his presence felt more directly. Groth was standing in the kitchen when a glass fell from the counter and shattered on the floor. He drew his blade instinctively, spinning to face the threat. Whiskers sat on the counter where the glass had been. He looked at the broken pieces, then at Groth, with an expression of pure innocence. His paw was exactly where the glass had stood. The creature attacked, Groth reported to Drenix. It knocked over a glass. Daniel corrected. Cats do that. They push things off surfaces. Nobody knows why. It is a dominance display. The beast is marking territory. Daniel started to argue, then stopped. Actually, Groth might be right about that one. As the sun set, the Veratt gathered in the living room to discuss their observations. They spoke in hushed tones, as if worried the cat might be listening. Given Whiskers' apparent ability to be everywhere at once, he probably was. The creature is silent, Phoenix summarized. It moves without sound, appears without warning, and strikes without purpose. It does not need food or survival motivation. It simply does these things because it chooses to. A predator without need, Drenix said thoughtfully. Killing for sport. The humans keep them as companions, Groth added. They willingly share their homes with these beasts. Not just keep them, Daniel interrupted. Cats chose to live with us. Thousands of years ago, they could have stayed wild. Instead, they moved into human settlements. They domesticated themselves. The room went quiet. Drenix stared at Daniel with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. The predator chose the humans, he said slowly. Not the other way around. That is the theory, yes. Why would a superior hunter choose to live with prey? Daniel smiled slightly. Who said we were prey? The question hung in the air. The Veratt looked at Daniel differently now, reconsidering the soft-looking human who worked in logistics and helped elderly relatives move furniture. His species had been chosen by predators as worthy companions. That meant something. Night fell again. The Veratt returned to the barn, but sleep came harder this time. Every small sound made them tense. Every shadow seemed to move. At some point, one warrior swore he woke to find Whiskers sitting on his chest, staring down at him from inches away. But when he blinked, the cat was gone. "I saw it," he told the others. "It was there. I felt its weight." "You were dreaming," Drenix said, but his voice lacked conviction. None of them slept well after that. Whiskers had gotten into their heads in a way that physical threats never had. A beast you could fight, an enemy you could understand. But this cat operated on principles they could not grasp, appearing and vanishing according to rules that made no sense. Daniel found Drenix standing alone outside the barn at midnight. The warrior was looking up at the stars, his expression troubled. "Your beast is effective," Drenix admitted. "He is not trying to be anything. He is just being a cat. That is what concerns me." Drenix turned to face Daniel. "The creatures we hunt, they fight because they must. Survival drives them. This cat has no such drive. It is fed, sheltered, safe. Yet it still hunts. It still stalks. It still watches from shadows. That is their nature." "Yes." Drenix looked back at the house, where a single window showed light from Margaret's bedroom. Whiskers sat on the windowsill, a small silhouette against the glow. "And your species welcomes them into your homes, into your families. You sleep beside creatures that kill for pleasure. They also purr when they are happy, and they are soft." Drenix said nothing. He simply watched the cat in the window, wondering what other secrets Earth was hiding. 3 days had passed, and the Veratt were not the same warriors who had arrived. They moved differently now, checking behind themselves constantly. They jumped at small sounds. The confidence that had filled them on the station was cracking around the edges. Drenix knew he needed to act. His warriors were beginning to doubt, and doubt was poison for a hunter. He decided to confront the cat directly, to prove once and for all that it was just a small creature and nothing more. He found Whiskers in the afternoon, sleeping in a patch of sunlight on the living room rug. The cat looked peaceful, almost cute. His orange fur glowed warm in the light, and his breathing was slow and steady. He seemed completely harmless. Drenix approached slowly, each step careful and quiet. The other Veratt watched from the doorway, and Daniel stood nearby with an expression of concern. "I would not do that," Daniel said. "I must," Drenix replied. "I will prove there is nothing to fear." He knelt down beside the sleeping cat, bringing his scarred face within inches of Whiskers. The position was uncomfortable, a massive predator crouching before a tiny one, but Drenix held it. He would show no hesitation. "Wake up, little beast," he said quietly. "Face me." Whiskers opened one eye, just one, yellow and sharp, focused directly on Drenix. The cat did not seem surprised or alarmed. He seemed annoyed at being disturbed. "I have faced creatures 1,000 times your size," Drenix continued. "I have killed beasts that could swallow you whole. You are nothing." Whiskers opened his second eye. He stretched slowly, extending his front legs in a long, lazy motion. His paws spread, and from each one, curved claws emerged. They were small compared to Veratt weapons, but they were sharp, clearly designed for piercing and holding. Then Whiskers yawned. His mouth opened wide, revealing rows of small, pointed teeth. The yawn went on longer than seemed natural, giving Drenix a perfect view of the cat's dental equipment. Those teeth were not for show. They were tools, refined over millions of years of evolution for one purpose. "Retractable claws," Daniel said from across the room. "Cats keep them hidden until they need them. Built-in weapons that stay sharp because they are protected." Drenix did not look away from Whiskers. "I noticed." The yawn ended. Whiskers regarded Drenix with that unreadable expression, neither afraid nor aggressive. Just watching, waiting. Then the cat moved. It happened so fast that Drenix never saw the strike. One moment Whiskers was lying still. The next there was a flash of orange, and 3 thin lines of blood appeared on Drenix's snout. The pain registered a second later, sharp and clean. By the time Drenix reacted, Whiskers was across the room, sitting on a chair, cleaning his paw. The cat had covered 15 feet in the time it took Drenix to blink. "Hi, Fawn." Phoenix rushed forward, concerned. Drenix raised a hand to stop him. He touched his snout, feeling the blood, and looked at the cat who had just marked him. The wounds were shallow, not meant to kill or even truly harm. It had been a message: you are my territory. I decide what happens here. The other Veratt stared in shock. Their greatest warrior, covered in scars from legendary hunts, had just been struck by a creature smaller than his foot, and he had not even seen it coming. I told you, Daniel said quietly. Aunt Margaret came in from the kitchen with a small first aid kit. She walked up to Drenix without hesitation and began cleaning the wounds on his face. Whiskers, that was rude, she scolded the cat. We do not scratch guests. Whiskers continued cleaning his paw, utterly indifferent to the reprimand. He does this sometimes, Margaret explained to Drenix as she applied bandages. Last year, a fox got into my chicken coop. Whiskers chased it off. The fox never came back. A fox is larger than this cat, Drenix said. Yes, it is. Whiskers did not care. Drenix looked at the small, orange creature on the chair. 400 million of these animals lived on Earth. 400 million tiny predators that could strike faster than the eye could follow, that felt no fear, that killed for sport. And humans kept them as pets. Your species is strange, Drenix finally said. We have been told that before. The Veratt regrouped in the barn that evening. The mood was different now. The mocking confidence from the station was gone, replaced by something quieter, something that might have been respect. The creature is impressive, Phoenix admitted. For its size. It is not about size, Drenix said. He touched the bandages on his snout. The beast has no size advantage, no armor, no venom. It has speed, silence, and complete fearlessness. Those three things together are worth more than strength. And the humans befriended them, Groth said. They did not conquer or tame them. The cats chose to stay, which means the humans offered something valuable enough to attract apex predators. Drenix sat down heavily on a hay bale. We have been thinking about this wrong. We assumed humans survived Earth by fighting everything. But what if they survived by making allies? The idea was revolutionary for the Veratt. Their entire culture was built on dominance, on being the strongest and most feared. It had never occurred to them that there might be another path. Daniel appeared in the barn doorway. Aunt Margaret wanted me to tell you that dessert is ready. She made pie. The warriors looked at their leader. Drenix stood up slowly. We will eat pie, he announced as they walked to the house. Drenix noticed Whiskers sitting on the porch railing, watching them approach. The cat's eyes seemed to glow in the fading light. Drenix gave a small nod as he passed. Whiskers blinked slowly, which Daniel had once mentioned was how cats showed respect, that IT was a start. The morning of departure came with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the smell of autumn leaves. Daniel stood beside the transport ship in the field behind the barn, watching the Veratt prepare to leave. They moved differently now, their arrogance softened into something more thoughtful. Drenix approached Daniel while his warriors finished loading their equipment. The bandages on his snout had been removed, revealing 3 thin scars that would likely remain for life. He wore them without complaint. I came to Earth expecting to prove our superiority, Drenix said. Instead, I leave with questions. Questions can be valuable. Perhaps. Drenix looked toward the farmhouse, where Aunt Margaret stood on the porch with Whiskers in her arms. The tiny old woman holding the small predator that had humbled the greatest Veratt hunter. Your species forms bonds with creatures that could kill you. Dogs, cats, horses. You bring wolves into your homes and call them family. They give us something we need, Daniel said. Companionship, loyalty, love in their own way. And in return, we give them the same. Drenix considered this. Among the Veratt, relationships were built on power and hierarchy. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. The idea of equal partnership with another species was foreign to their understanding. We will return to our world with much to think about, Drenix finally said. He extended his hand in the human gesture he had observed. You have shown us something unexpected, Daniel Reeves. Daniel shook his hand. Just remember that cats are everywhere. If the Veratt ever visit Earth again, there will be no avoiding them. I will remember. The Veratt boarded their section of the transport. Daniel walked to the house to say goodbye to his aunt. She was still holding Whiskers, scratching behind his ears while he purred contentedly. They seemed different, Margaret observed. Less shouty. They learned something here. I think Whiskers taught them about humility. He teaches everyone about humility. The mailman, the veterinarian, that nice couple who wanted to buy the farm last year. She smiled. Whiskers does not care who you are or how important you think you are. To him, everyone is just a potential source of treats and scratches. Daniel laughed and hugged his aunt carefully, mindful of the cat between them. I will be back in a month to help with the final move. Call me if you need anything before then. I will be fine. I have Whiskers. The transport lifted off an hour later, carrying Daniel and the Veratt back toward the stars. Earth grew smaller in the viewports until it was just a blue dot against the black point 2 weeks later. Daniel received a message on his communicator. It was from Drenix. I have shared my experience with the Veratt Council. They were skeptical until I showed them the scars. Now, they want to study Earth's domestication history. They find it difficult to believe that predators would choose to live with humans, but the evidence is clear. We are sending researchers. Daniel smiled and typed a reply. Just tell them not to stare at the cats. They find it rude. Months passed. Daniel returned to his work on the trading stations, but he heard stories. The Veratt were changing. Not dramatically, not overnight, but slowly. They had begun attempting to form partnerships with creatures on their colony worlds instead of simply dominating them. It was messy and often failed, but they were trying. Drenix sent periodic updates. The Veratt had successfully befriended a pack of hunting beasts on one of their territories. The creatures still hunted, still killed, but they did so alongside Veratt handlers rather than against them. It was a small victory, but it pointed towards something larger. Your cat broke something in us, Drenix wrote. But perhaps it needed to be broken. A year after the visit, Daniel returned to Earth again. Aunt Margaret had moved to the assisted living facility, but she had insisted on bringing Whiskers despite the rules against pets. The staff had objected until Whiskers spent an afternoon staring at the administrator. The objections disappeared after that. Daniel found his aunt in the community garden, sitting in a wheelchair with Whiskers on her lap. The cat was older now, his orange fur showing threads of white, but his yellow eyes were as sharp as ever. Danny, come sit with us. He pulled up a chair and joined them in the afternoon sun. Other residents moved through the garden, and several stopped to pet Whiskers. The cat tolerated their attention with the grace of a monarch accepting tribute from peasants. I heard about your alien friends, Margaret said. They are becoming quite famous. The warrior species that learned kindness from Housecat. That is not exactly how I would describe it, but it is true, is it not? Daniel looked at Whiskers, who had closed his eyes and was purring loudly. This small creature, through nothing more than being himself, had shifted the cultural trajectory of an entire species. He had not tried to teach the Veratt anything. He had simply existed, confident and fearless, and utterly indifferent to their strength. Yes, Daniel admitted. I suppose it is true. Whiskers opened one eye, looked at Daniel, then closed it again. He did not care about galactic politics or cultural shifts or the grand sweep of history. He cared about sunshine and food and the occasional mouse. But perhaps that was the lesson. The Veratt had spent centuries at trying to prove they were the strongest, the most feared, the apex of all things. Whiskers had never tried to prove anything. He simply was what he was, and the universe could adjust itself accordingly. The sun moved across the sky, and Daniel sat with his aunt and her cat, enjoying the simple peace of a quiet afternoon on Earth. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Veratt were learning to be partners instead of conquerors. And it had all started because one human made an offhand comment about his aunt's cat. Whiskers purred on, content with his place in the universe. Some creatures just know they're exactly what they are supposed to be.